Musk has attacked Trump. Musk had already ghosted Trump. Now Musk is attacking Trump. At this point, it is still passive-aggressive, but it is unmistakable. An attack by Musk on Trump. How is that possible? Who could have ever foreseen that relying on a chemicaled up, psychologically impaired, persistently overpromising, compulsive sperm donor who may have been the victim of a botched penile implant, who could have ever foreseen that could be a bad thing? But he's exactly like my eldest son. Musk has ghosted Trump. More importantly, Musk's money is going to ghost Trump, and bluntly, without Musk's money, $275 million in the election, thank you, Citizens United and Floyd Abrams. Without Musk's money and Musk's tech bro vote and Musk's we'll be on Mars next week vote and Musk's white supremacist apartheid vote, Trump probably loses. Musk has ghosted Trump and is starting to attack Trump. And Trump can't say a word because unless Musk bankrolls it, Trump will not be able to subvert the Constitution and run for a third term. And unless Musk bankrolls it, a Trump successor will never get off the ground. And unless Musk bankrolls it, the Republicans will lose the House next year and maybe the Senate too. All Trump has been able to do thus far is the really sad sight of publishing without comment a screenshot of a Musk tweet thanking and praising Trump, and the tweet is from May 28th. Musk's response was to pin to his feed a tweet from an expert. It's from a woman in Vegas who shows herself in a string bikini grilling burgers. So, next Trump Supreme Court Justice nominee. It encourages conservatives to go to the comment sections at Fox News, and quoting this magic chef, almost every comment is in agreement with Elon. To see so many vehemently disagreeing with Trump is wild. Then there are screenshots. Screenshots of comments, not burgers or buns. It is a passive-aggressive attack on Trump by Musk via a second party with burgers and buns and screenshots. But make no mistake, it's an attack. And this is the best part. Trump cannot trash Musk in return. As much as he wants to, no doubt. As much as Musk attacks the House for Trump's budget bill and its $2.4 trillion add to the deficit without mentioning Trump, even though it's Trump's bill, and those idiots in the House like Mike Johnson are just Trump's slaves. As much as Musk is still protecting Trump from himself in this manner, Trump has to do the most difficult thing in the world for him: shut himself up. Keep his mouth closed and his fingers off the phone. Trump may yet snap. He may lash out at Musk. Lord knows there's never been anybody else Trump has ever been betrayed by or even insufficiently supported by that he hasn't lashed out at. But strategically, the entirety of Trump world has got to be focusing itself on pouring fresh buckets of ice water over Trump every 20 minutes, because if he comes back at Musk, MAGA is suddenly broke. Trump is already facing Musk's Trumpian barrage of tweets. The other night, 13 of them, about as many yesterday afternoon, demanding that America vote out all the congressmen who voted for the budget bill. And guess who they are? They're Republicans. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. Fire all politicians who betrayed the American people. And the memes of kill the bill. Despite what the New York Times posited the other night, the Democrats don't have to consider taking Musk back, whatever that means. Musk just did all we could ever ask for him. He just endorsed every Democratic congressional candidate. And before that, he endorsed every potential primary of every sitting Republican House member. And we haven't even gotten to the Senate yet. Musk just this week doubled the cost of electing Republicans next year and shut off his own money spigot. And if you're wondering about the principles involved, These are not complex matters of finance or deficit as a percentage of GDP or the sustainability of the debt ceiling system. It's simple. The rich, and especially the especially rich, all eventually see their lives ruined by the same monomania. The more money they make, the more time they waste, and the more pain they feel at having to give any of that money to anybody else, especially as part of taxes, especially as part of some kind of responsibility dealio about mankind, where mankind asks for like $1 back for every million these guys get to keep. Money. It's all Musk is. It's all Trump is. It's all Scott Bessent is. It's all of them are. This is about them paying less taxes. Because $1 trillion is not going as far as it used to. Anyway, thanks, ghosting Elmo. Thanks, passive-aggressive Elmo, for kneeing Trump in the groin. And we will get back to you if we need you at any of the Democratic events. Who in the hell am I kidding? Musk has also, and more obviously, ghosted the Republican Party in whole, especially the House Republicans. But the real issue is Trump, who, and remember, the quote is in the Wall Street Journal from the very same White House officials who got Trump to chase Musk out in the first place. Trump, who finally realized the $11 trillion in cuts Musk promised was another one of Musk's hallucinations, his most vivid fantasies from his most profound fugue states. Trump finally asked, was it all bullshit? Oh my, yes. You mean even you were too disconnected to realize it was all bullshit? That it was bullshit? That it was all bullshit? That everything Musk says is bullshit? The new reporting on this is limited and controlled. The leak to its stenographer at Politico, Dasha Burns, is, quote, the West Wing is perplexed, unenthused, and disappointed. You bet your ass. And over on Capitol Hill, why, Mike Johnson is in shock that Lyle Lanley didn't return his calls about the new Springfield monorail.
Well, I'll tell you, I called Elon last night and he didn't answer, but I hope to talk to him today. I mean, it's not, it's very friendly and we've laughed about our differences on policy before. Full disclosure, Elon and I had a great conversation, about a half-hour-long talk on Monday this week. Monday morning, and we talked about the big beautiful bill, because I think he was trying to make a joke a couple of days earlier. It can't be big and beautiful, and I started the conversation. Oh yes, it can, my friend. It's very beautiful. I talk to President Trump, all the time, multiple times a day. Obviously, we've talked about this. He's as you know, he's not delighted that Elon did a 180 on that, but. Look, I don't know what happened in 24 hours. Everybody can draw their own conclusions about that, okay? But I look forward to talking to my friend about it again, and I'm not upset about it, all right?
Mike, you effed up. You trusted Musk. By the way, Mike Johnson talks and sounds like a guy who should be saying, well, traffic is backed up throughout the corridor after that explosion at the rhubarb factory, and now here are the Statler brothers. And I love the Statler brothers. Captain Kangaroo, oh, don't tell me. Some other headlines. Trump says he's talked to Putin for 90 minutes, largely about Ukraine. Says Putin says he will now have to avenge the Ukrainian attacks on air bases in Russia. Oh, no, what's he going to do, Donnie? Start bombing Ukrainian civilians? Trump is an utter fool. A Russian simp. Never mind whether Putin or Zelensky wants peace. If Trump wanted peace, he should be right now congratulating Ukraine on the best incursion into Russia since Napoleon reached Moscow. He should be saying, look, if Russia wants peace, this is simple. Remove Putin. Trump has also attacked Columbia University again. Do you see what happens when you try to appease? He is now trying to get its accreditation removed, alleging discriminatory admission policies, trying to turn it into not a university. It is not too late, Claire. Kill your deal. Sue him for $100 trillion. Call Harvard. Trump's guy in charge of pardoning those who tried to overthrow democracy for him has a new target. He wants to pardon the fake electors. The written analysis of the May outlook for U.S. agricultural trade from the U.S. Department of Agriculture was ready to go on May 29th, but it predicted an increase in the nation's farm goods trade deficit to a record, no less, $49 billion. We can't have that. So Trump didn't release the written part. A redacted version was released Monday of this week. No written part. The part with the trade deficit still has not been released because, says a USDA spokesman, it's undergoing internal review by Winston Smith. 6079 Smith W. at the Ministry of Truth. Smith 6079 will also be looking at the Florida meteorologist who apologized to his viewers the other day because he would not be able to warn them anymore about hurricanes because the government isn't telling anybody what it knows about hurricanes. So good luck, Florida. And the Office of Management and Budget, where the evil moron behind Project 2025, the ironically named Russ Vogt, hides. It is boasting on social media about the money it has cut from PBS and, keeping American kids from starving and, quote, $4 million saved for legume systems research. It helpfully attached a photo of 6 or 7 types of legumes, beans, legume systems research. What's that? Sounds French. It's how to breed healthier and more durable beans and other innovations, and also improving upon some past innovations, like from 7,000 years ago. One of them was called crop rotation. We are deliberately destroying knowledge so that Trump will not be so stupid compared to everybody else. And by the way, he is complaining now internally, according to several reports, about a Supreme Court justice he does not like, who he thinks is weak, thinks is not upholding his agenda. Ketanji Brown Jackson? Sotomayor? Nope. Amy Coney Barrett. Okay. Who's going to break it to him? Now, story time. Nearly 4 decades ago, I was preparing to get back into television after a long hiatus taking care of my family. I'm going to leave the details of this out, which is too bad in one way because my gratitude to the news director who took a chance on me all those years ago is endless and boundless. And I always think of him at this time of year because it happened at this time of year. But there was one drawback to the job, and it is relevant to our current political system. The one drawback was hinted at to me by members of the sports department at this TV station long before I even signed the contract. The station had another sportscaster. He did the weekends, who he's described to me not just as the dumbest person any of them there had ever met, but very possibly the dumbest person who had ever lived. We eventually fired him after he mispronounced the same hockey name 31 weeks in a row. Then after he tried to sneak some woman into a team's press box and decided the best place to stash her was the seat that in fact belonged to the general manager of that team, and they then refused to give him any more press credentials. And I believe the last I heard he had not worked in sports television since, and this was like 4 decades ago. He was offered another job. I know that after about 2 years of unemployment, a good one, working with a guy who did a national sportscast. But the story I heard was as they were about to draw up the contract and they were congratulating him on getting the job, he had a good voice and he looked like a Greek god and he fit suits really well. He said, "Oh, by the way, I never fly business class. It has to be first." And they said, well, the guy who does this national sportscast you'll be working with, he doesn't even fly first. And this guy shrugged, and I guess he's somewhere now, still waiting for them to send him the contract with the first-class airfare guarantee in it. Anyway, the point. He was on the air one night with the fellow who preceded me as the sports director of this station, and my predecessor was live from Chicago. And as they wrapped up the segment, the dumb guy asks my predecessor, by the way, do you have a good view of the ocean from your hotel? My predecessor realizes he's not joking. He's serious, and he looks at him like, huh? And finally he says, oh, the lake. Lake Michigan. You mean, do I have a good view of the lake from my hotel? And the guy back in the studio, the dumb one, says, yeah, the ocean, Lake Michigan. Ocean, Lake Michigan. I mention him, and I'm going to pretend I've forgotten his name, even though when we fired him, the entire sports department came in to the office, many of them on their nights off, for a party, highlighted by the moment at which we went outside and painted over his name on his parking spot, and a mighty roar went up from the crowd. And I mention him at length because every time I read another story about Trump and this group of absolute idiots he has picked to run this country into the ground, I think of that weekend sportscaster. And I keep waiting to hear he's been nominated as Secretary of Geography, or the head of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that isn't supplying the hurricane reports anymore, or he's been elected senator from somewhere, because these people may actually be dumber than he was. What you will hear first is Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma. Mark Wayne, one word, dropped out of Missouri Valley College, but later got an associate degree in construction technology from Oklahoma State University Institute of Technology. And I'm not trying to demean construction. My dad's architectural career was intertwined with it, but that's some academic resume item for a guy who you will hear trying to complain to the Secretary of Lack of Education, Linda McMahon, about how academic standards have fallen in this country, but doesn't know the difference between the words was and were. Twice he shows he does not know the difference between was and were.
What was we ranked in reading and math in 1979?
I'm sorry, what?
What was we ranked nationally in math and reading in 1979?
We were very, very low on the totem pole.
We were number one in 1979.
What was we ranked? Senator, if you wanted to emphasize educational deterioration, you could have just held up a picture of yourself. If you notice, he also got the word nationally wrong. He meant internationally. Doesn't know the difference. Mark Wayne. The look on the face of Linda McMahon, who infamously said that the acronym for artificial intelligence was pronounced A1, that look was almost ineffable. It may have been produced by her realization that for the first time ever, she was not the stupidest person in the room. After Senator Associate Degree in Construction Tech, I give you the endless fountain of stupidity and falsehoods that is the press secretary with the word lie contained in both her first and last names, the center fielder from a Division III softball program, Caroline Leavitt.
President Trump sounded the alarm over these reckless Biden policies for years. Law and order is back in America under President Trump. For example, just before Congress enacted the original Trump tax cut.
You heard it. President Trump. I'll play it again in a moment. President Trump. Caroline Leavitt is not only an amazing perpetual motion lying machine, she's rapidly also turning into a mispronunciation machine. Let's listen again to it and then connect it to her greatest mispronunciation hit when she mispronounced the name of Hitler.
Trump tax cuts at the end of 2017.
Adolf Hitler.
What was we ranked nationally in education? Caroline, is it okay if we all compare Chump to Hilter? What was the Harry Potter premise where they turned all of the people in charge of the government into the stupidest people in the world, and they all destroyed the government by being stupid? But this required, of course, wizards and wands, and we don't need wizards and wands. We just find the stupidest people in the world and put them in charge. But the truth leaks out around the corners. President Trump. Do you have a good view of the ocean? Also of interest here, the beat goes on. A Fox News expert says the real story in Trump's post about Biden being cloned, executed, and turned into a robot is that it raises the possibility that during the last administration, the nation was run by a cabal of unelected officials. You heard me. She said cable. That's next. This is Countdown.
George Carlin, pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. This is the best news show ever. I told that to one of your producers, and I want you to know that. I've seen them all, and it's just, especially the first 35 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
It's just unparalleled.
I got bad news between you and I. We got 6 minutes to completely screw that into the ground.
Okay, that's good.
Hey, if he said that about you and your newscast, you'd keep playing it too. Sometimes it keeps me going. Doing this podcast is often like gargling, flaming chainsaws. Indulge me. Still ahead on this edition of Countdown, I was telling somebody the other day that I think I have now met every kind of crazy person in media management. I met the drunk who came back from lunch drunk one day, and drunk fired me, mostly because I was 21 and I wasn't drunk, and they wound up reprimanding him for being drunk and apologizing to me. I turned down a job with an executive from Madison Square Garden who then decided to try to talk me out of turning the job down by calling me up at my home and swearing at me and threatening me. He thought this would encourage me to go work for him. But the weirdest of them all, I have decided as I approach my half-century mark in this business, was the head of MSNBC. And he reached his weirdness apex 21 years ago tomorrow, when he wanted to postpone the news so he could do an anniversary feature he had worked on all week. The news he wished to postpone? That Ronald Reagan had just died. Can't we talk about it later? Next in Things I Promised Not to Tell. And this was the guy who chased me around the studios one day and threatened to kill me. That wasn't nearly as weird as this day, the anniversary of which is tomorrow. First, believe it or not, there's still more new idiots to talk about. The roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's other worst persons in the world. The bronze, Stephen Chung, Trump spokesman and resident setter of the lowest bar in spokesperson history. Honestly, sometimes I think he's a plant. I don't mean a Democratic plant. He was planted by Democrats. I sometimes think he's a house plant. Chung reposted a viral clip and added to it, quote, "Must watch. Don't believe the legacy media's biased reporting. Americans overwhelmingly support Trump's agenda." The viral clip that Chung tweeted to prove that the legacy media was biased in its reporting, and you should never listen to the legacy media, and the legacy media is biased, so don't ever believe a word you see on the legacy media. Don't ever do it. It's the legacy media. They're against Trump. The clip he sent, it was a segment from CNN, which the last time I checked was legacy media, even though its legacy is kind of dying. The runner-up, a tie between former New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, a putz, and Abby Phillip, the CNN host of the new show Let's Let Republicans Lie for an Hour with Abby Phillip. She is now in her third year of being in totally over her head. In a segment about Trump's insane post in which it was clear he was saying Biden had been cloned, then executed, then replaced by a robot in 2020, Sununu, who's a putz, incidentally, said that everybody is to blame in this and the Democrats boost conspiracy theories too. And Abby Phillip, who is down to 98,000 viewers in the ad demo, then read a tweet by Trump claiming the fake news had photoshopped a photo and thus claimed there was a fake Melania or a Melania double or something, so it's all the same. 2 notes. Who photoshopped the photo of Melania, Abby? Was that Biden who did that? Or Kamala? Or somebody who worked for them? Or the Democratic National Committee? Or the head of some House group that belongs to the Democrats? Or was some random account on Twitter? Or on Truth Social that Trump found? You're using Trump's evidence to support Trump's bullshit argument. The 98,000 demo viewers is actually a shock because it's so high. The second note, even Trump wasn't saying the Democrats had done this. He said the news had done this. You assumed it had something to do with the Democrats, Abby? The Democrats don't own the news, and you know how we know that? Because if the Democrats owned the news, or if Democrats or liberals owned CNN, they would have gotten rid of Abby Phillip by now. And certainly the asshole Scott Jennings would be back doing whatever he used to do full time. Cooking fajitas somewhere, or knishes. But the winner, Kaylee McGee White, someone from the Washington Examiner. I know, I could just stop there and go to the break right there, saying the names Kaylee and Washington Examiner. That's enough to win worst person in the world. Wait, there's more. That's also Kaylee McGee White of one of the American Federation of Women Federations of Women Federations and whatever. There's 10 million of these fascist think tanks. They all involve the same 6 words just listed in a different order. Federation Women Tank Think. Anyway, Fox brought her on to discuss the Trump-cloned executed robot story with the anchor John Roberts. Incidentally, John used to be, in addition to being a VJ in Canada, John was then a news reporter in Canada and the United States and anchored the news on CBS on the weekends. Now, he's just another Trump whore reading propaganda. He read Trump's insane post and says, I know Trump's sense of humor. It's humor, H-U-M-O-U-R. I know Trump's sense of humor. I'm sure he was just trolling. And this Kaylee McGee White, who they put on Fox evidently because they like Kayleys on Fox. Hey, order up some more Kayleys. They grow them on the Kaylee farm in South Dakota. Call Christy. She must know where the Kayleys are. Yeah, the Kaylee farm. It's near the Christie Ranch. Anyway, Kaylee said the real issue was being obscured here by all of the nonsense about the tweet. The real issue to Kaylee McGee White was that, namely, who was running the country during the Biden presidency? Quote, was it a clone? She began to giggle. Was it a cable of White House officials? A cable! She said a cable! She meant the word cabal. She thinks the word cabal is pronounced cable. C-A-B-A-L, cabal. And apparently, every time she's ever heard it from one of her friends over there at the American Federation of Kayleys, they've pronounced it cable. Why not cabal? Was it a clown? Was it a cabal of White House officials? Was it a cabal of White House officials now on cable? She also says, Kaylee McGee-White, she is a fellow at the Steamboat Institute, which seems like a rather unfortunate thing to admit about oneself, realistically. Kaylee McGee, we are at the mercy of a cable of White House officials. White, today's other worst person in the world. Cable! Holy crap! Cable! Refund! 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 To my favorite topic, me, and things I promised not to tell, and D-Day plus 60. It was June 6th, 2004, and MSNBC's new president, Rick Kaplan, needed to make a mark on the network for his new bosses, and he decided this was going to be it. On June 6, 2004, maybe the last even-numbered anniversary of D-Day where we'd have a lot of people left who were there, we'd turn the network all D-Day. June 6, 2004 basically was going to be June 6, 1944 relived. Tom Brokaw live on the beaches of Normandy, and somebody there and somebody here, and his main two MSNBC news anchors, me and Lester Holt, anchoring 2-hour blocks devoted to the anniversary and then switching off, and he came back and I would go away, and then I'd come back and he would go away. Just wall to wall. I'm Rick Kaplan, and I used to produce for Walter Cronkite to not only lock in his new gig at MSNBC, but set himself up for his next goal, executive in charge of the Today Show or NBC Nightly News or something bigger than that little crap shack we ran at MSNBC. For my part, I was dispatched first to interview one of the surprisingly large number of soldiers and sailors and airmen who survived D-Day and went on to fame. There were actors Charles Durning and James Doohan, Scotty on Star Trek, and the author J.D. Salinger, and Seaman Second Class Yogi Berra. I met Yogi at his museum in New Jersey, and I swear to God he and his son demanded a friendly bribe to do the interview, and what they wanted was my copy of the 1963 Topps Yogi Berra baseball card. Seriously. That's the toughest one to find, Yogi said. We never have enough of them here. I always enjoyed Yogi, but he had more to say about his 1963 baseball card and its relative scarcity than he did about the D-Day invasion and his chief on his rocket launcher boat telling him to keep his head down or he might get to watch it fly off his neck. Anyway, the Berra interview was fine, and it was done, and we edited like 15 very, very short answers into about 2 minutes of not bad narrative. And I had written a couple of other D-Day features, and I'd written some other scripts on Friday, and by Sunday we were all crammed into the main MSNBC conference room in Secaucus, New Jersey, everybody working a 6th day, and you would have thought this guy, Rick Kaplan, president of the network, was leading the actual invasion of Normandy, not merely a cable TV network coverage of the 60th anniversary thereof. Kaplan was waxing poetic about how important this was for us and how it would put us on the map against CNN and Fox and how we had covered all the contingencies, and that's when people's phones started vibrating and ringing. Kaplan was still enjoying the sound of his own voice as these phones gradually drowned him out when one of the producers finished whispering into his BlackBerry and then said, "Excuse me, Rick, we have a problem. Ronald Reagan has just died." Without a word, 20 people at that conference table rose and then froze, realizing that before they abandoned this meeting to go get on the air as quickly as possible and then to lay out what would be rolling coverage till at least midnight of Reagan's death and life and the reaction to it, till further notice, we couldn't just start. We basically had to wait for the president of the network, who was sitting there, Rick Kaplan, to say, "Okay, we'll figure out the D-Day stuff later. It's Reagan Day. Let's go." Except he didn't say that. Looking crestfallen, looking like a kid who's had his toys stolen and then broken as he watched. Rick Kaplan swept the room with his gaze. He stopped on me. Thanks. couldn't we just do half an hour of Reagan and then half an hour of my D-Day and then half an hour of... And he trailed off. And I said, Rick, it's a 2-term president. I mean, I think he was full of crap, but apparently a lot of America thinks he's some sort of icon. And by the way, it just happened like 11 minutes ago. It didn't happen 60 years ago. I'm sorry. He was almost literally pouting. But what about all my D-Day coverage? President of the network. And I said, well, we can run those pieces throughout the day tomorrow. They won't just disappear. We don't have to go degauss the tapes. Okay. We realized that the president of the news network was not going to be any use helping us cover the first big breaking news story of his presidency because he couldn't bear to change his plans to accommodate breaking presidential news. This was at the end of month 3 of the Rick Kaplan MSNBC presidency. He was already on the ropes with us. He would later be the guy who chased me around the studios because he was squeamish and I'd mentioned blood on the air and he thought I was trying to sabotage his great show with Rita Cosby. He would soon be the network president who did not know what was live on TV and what was on delay. I'll tell you that story in a minute, too. However, the Rick Kaplan story starts in the men's room at MSNBC. It is February 17th, 2004. At one of those moronic corporate speak town halls, the bosses have just introduced Rick Kaplan as the new president of the network. Kaplan speaks for an hour without interruption. He does not mention that he was the president of CNN when its 19-year streak at number 1 in the cable news ratings came to an abrupt end. He does, however, mention that he is 6 feet 7 inches tall. But he does not seem to be 6 feet 7 inches tall. As this nonsense ends, I rush into the men's room and find, to my amusement, Joe Scarborough, Chris Matthews, Jesse Ventura, Lester Holt, and one unoccupied urinal. As I move to occupy it, it dawns on me that Ventura, the former professional wrestler, is the shortest man in the bathroom at 6 feet 2. All 5 of us are silent. Finally, Matthews says it. How in the hell can he say he's 6'7"? He's barely taller than I am, and I'm 6'4". Olbermann, are you slightly taller than me or slightly shorter than me? How is he 6'7"? Everybody keeps looking forward, of course, into the wall in front of us. I'm 6'3.5". Lester, he's your height. I saw you standing with him. You two are even. What are you, 6'5"? Lester says, uh-huh, and flushes. Scarborough chimes in. Oh, I'm just over 6'4". We're almost eye to eye. He's not 6'7". Finally, Ventura speaks. I've been thrown around a ring by guys who are 6'7". This guy's not 6'7". From the sink, Lester Holt now says, have any of you known anybody our height who lies and says they're taller? Matthews again. Who lies about their height? I flush. This guy does. Gentlemen, we are in trouble here. For the presidency of Rick Kaplan at MSNBC, that might have been, sorry, I can't resist it, the high water mark. Later, on Friday, March 5th, 2004, Kaplan, who had been there 3 weeks, assembled the hosts and producers of the primetime shows on the network. That would have been me, Scarborough, Dan Abrams, our staffs, the New Jersey staff of Chris Matthews' show, and he told us that the next day was going to be Monday. Somebody from Scarborough's staff helpfully corrected him. Mr. Kaplan, I'm sorry, tomorrow is Saturday. Kaplan sternly explained he was now president of this network and we all sucked. And if he said today was Friday and tomorrow was Monday, then today was Friday and tomorrow was Monday. He wanted to see us react to sudden changes in our plans. We were being told we were being called into work a 6th day tomorrow for no reason. Kaplan then started yelling at us. You guys don't get it. You're all working tomorrow. Anybody who doesn't come in is fired. We're going to do the whole primetime lineup. Your breaking news is today's breaking news. The guilty verdict in the Martha Stewart case. Start booking your guests because tomorrow is Monday, not Saturday. Just on my staff, Saturday was supposed to be my reporter's engagement party, a surprise party thrown by one of my producers for his wife's birthday, and the day another producer was closing on buying a house. I have a vague memory of what we put on the air. I have a stronger memory of the new president of MSNBC losing the staffs of all 4 of his primetime shows on his 5th day on the job and never, ever getting them back. Kaplan then went to a corkboard on our office wall on which our show rundown was displayed. He ordered producers to move segments around, and he berated me for not having anticipated his whims. And at one point he screamed, "Stop! What the hell are you doing?" And he got up and he grabbed the push pin, which held up an index card bearing the name of a guest. "You don't use green pins with yellow index cards. You use yellow pins with yellow index cards. What kind of a newsman are you?" Can't imagine how this guy choked away CNN's monopoly on cable news ratings. I was reminded recently that later on, December 8th, 2005, 17 years ago tomorrow, he did one of the most unintentionally funniest things I have ever witnessed. A plane slid off the runway at Midway Airport in Chicago. Nothing funny about that, obviously. But Kaplan called into our control room demanding we changed something about our live coverage that he didn't like. We promptly made the change. He was right. 5 minutes later, he called in and started swearing at one of our producers. "I told you to change that. F you, you're fired." And the producer said, "We changed it 5 minutes ago when you called in." Silence. "Rick, are you watching the network on some sort of delay? Are you watching on TiVo or something?" Silence again. Finally, he said, "Okay, good work. See you tomorrow," and hung up. He didn't know he was watching it on a delay. Kaplan was also one of these, forget the mean thing I said yesterday, God knows I have kind of guys. By Monday, he had heard people laughing at some of my on-air jokes, and his front-runner instincts took over. He called me and the producer in for a meeting. "I have only one criticism of your show. The which of these stories will you be talking about thing is genius. The 5th story, the 4th story, then the 3rd story, it's original and fresh." I hesitated. I almost said to him, "Yeah, this whole counting thing, we just invented that. The music is genius. The graphics are genius. You're genius, but you're missing something obvious, something genius. After each one of these stories, after you thank your guest, you should do a list of the things you didn't tell us about those stories. So like after the 5th story, you should say, now, here are the other 5 things we didn't tell you about the 5th story. Get it? A full screen graphic and you telling people. And then 4 things for the 4th story and 3 for the 3rd. I thought for a moment, and I said, "Okay, but what happens if we make those graphics up and then a minute beforehand the guest brings up one of those things we claim we didn't tell you when he just told you?" We had lost Rick Kaplan's attention by that point. He grunted. For a second, I thought his eyes were pointing outwards in different directions, but he snapped himself back into this reality. Could happen. You'll figure it out. Anyway, too late to do it today. Figure it out and do it tomorrow. Thanks." The producer and I had to then explain to the staff of Countdown that from now on, for every story, they had to deliberately leave out 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 facts or details. Something interesting enough to be made into a full-screen graphic, but not interesting enough to be included in their scripts or the interviews with the guests. Suddenly, I thought a lot of people's eyes were pointing outwards in different directions. The line producer, Greg Kordick, who was in charge not of content but of timing things and making sure things like graphics got made, said matter-of-factly, "This will add 5 hours to everybody's workday." And so it did. After the next day's show, when we listed the top 5 things we didn't tell you about today's 5th story and the top 4 things we didn't tell you about today's 4th story, etc., and we had to shorten all the scripts and shorten each interview just to make room for all of this extraneous crap, Greg, the producer, said, "People here will be quitting by Thursday and dying by Monday." And I said, "You're right. Plus, it ruins the interviews and it weakens the show. Don't do it tomorrow. If Kaplan yells, I'll take the heat." So now it's Wednesday. And not only don't I hear anything from Kaplan about the Tuesday show and the top 5 things we didn't tell you about today's 5th story jazz, but after the Wednesday show, when we don't do it, I'm sitting there waiting for an enraged phone call because we didn't. Thursday morning at home, I'm waiting for an enraged email. Thursday afternoon, I'm waiting for an enraged Kaplan in person. Nothing. He never said a word. A week passes. Nothing. A month. 2 months. It's summer. Nothing. The rest of 2004 flies by. Nothing. We did it once. We never did it again. And then he never said anything. It is now January 2005, and he still hasn't said anything, and I'm told by Phil Griffin, my first producer in television sports, and 16 years later, my first producer in television news, who has since become the vice president of MSNBC, that Kaplan wants to see us in his office. It's not a big deal, Phil says. He's in a good mood. He just wants to make us feel like we have input into his decisions. This is a what do you think meeting. Now, I have to ask you to carefully picture the layout of Rick Kaplan's office at MSNBC in the year 2005. Envision a long, narrow room. Baseball's MLB network now operates there, and they have cleverly turned Kaplan's office into a wardrobe room. Perfect, since it was really just a long closet anyways. Rick Kaplan, who was 6'5" but lied and said he was 6'7", sat at the very back of this room. So you come in the front door, you turn to your right, and maybe 30, 35, 40 feet away from you in the farthest corner, facing his computer on his desk, flush against the left-hand wall, is the president of MSNBC. A few feet into the room is where you sit. Halfway between these 2 points, against the right-hand wall, is where another executive can sit. So Phil Griffin sits there. I'm just inside the door. He is 15 feet ahead of me to the right. Rick Kaplan is 30 feet or 40 feet ahead of me to the left. Picture this carefully. The way these chairs and desks are arranged. If you're me and Phil Griffin is looking at you, Rick Kaplan can only see the back of Phil Griffin's head and not his face. If they are both looking at you, they cannot see each other. Weird? Seemingly trivial? Turned out to be essential. We begin this meaningless meeting and talk about guests and graphics, fonts, and Kaplan talks about how much the ratings have gone up in his year as president. And finally, I say, I do have one suggestion. I think the show is going to be very successful, and I think if we want to make any changes, we should make them now before it becomes successful. And I say, I have never heard anybody say they like the fifth story, fourth story, third story stuff. If you want to continue the name countdown because people know it by now, that's great, I guess. But the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 numbering is a conceit, and it's a lot of extra work for everybody, and I think we should kill it now. Kaplan is aghast. He is pale. He is not angry. He is just stunned. But you can't do that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is part of the reasons the ratings went up. The ratings went up when I came up with the idea of the top 5 things we didn't tell you about today's top 5 stories, and the top 4 things we didn't tell you about today's number 4 story, etc. We can't stop that. That's why people watch. My idea. Took me a split second to even remember what the hell it was he was talking about. I had forgotten the whole 5 things we didn't tell you albatross weeks after the one show we did it, and then the staff rebelled and I said screw it and I'll take the heat. And I was about to say this out loud when I suddenly realized that Phil Griffin, 15 feet away on the right, his face turned to me and thus invisible to Kaplan, 30 feet away on the left, was making his eyes as wide as possible, and Phil was looking right at me and silently mouthing the word no, 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 all the while keeping his head completely still so Kaplan didn't know he was talking to me silently. I got Phil's message. I dropped the subject. I didn't say it. The meeting ended maybe 2 minutes later with Kaplan saying, keep up the good work, and ushering us out by saying, and keep up with the top 5 things we didn't tell you about today's 5th story. That's what's making it really cook. When we were out of earshot of Rick Kaplan, Griffin thanked me for being able to read his panicked lips. I used an oath to liven up my question. What the blank was that all about? And Griffin said, now you know what every day of my life has become. It's not worth it to try to correct him. He believes what he believes, and he won't be checked or contradicted. And I said, we only did the 5 things we didn't tell you thing once. Only once. It's like a year later. How in the hell could he possibly think we're still doing it? Griffin laughed like a soldier on a World War I battlefield who has just run out of bullets. See, that's the problem, buddy. He only watches MSNBC here in the office. The place he's renting, it doesn't have cable. President of MSNBC doesn't have cable at home. On June 6th, 2006, they fired Rick Kaplan as the president of MSNBC. They let him resign. They also let him keep his secret, the darkest of secrets, for him and for MSNBC, that for his 2 years on the throne, the president of an all-news cable channel did not have cable. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Rick Kaplan. It could be a Broadway show. His career, just the parts I witnessed, at least 85 minutes of unbelievable entertainment. Like, I don't know, like you can't take it with you kind of humor. Non-stop Kaufman kind of humor from the 1920s and 30s. Totally unbelievable. Most of our countdown music, I'll do a special on Rick Kaplan one of these days. Maybe next Tuesday. Most of our countdown music was arranged, produced, and performed by Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, our musical directors of Countdown. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Mr. Ray was on the guitars, bass, and drums. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The Olbermann theme from ESPN2 appears courtesy of ESPN Inc. It's the sports music. It was written by Mitch Warren Davis. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed, and my announcer today was my late friend, George Carlin. None of this is his fault. Everything else was, as always, my fault. Although George did help. That's Countdown for today. Happy birthday, sis. Happy belated birthday, Kit. Day 137 of America held hostage, just 1,326 days until the scheduled end of Trump's lame duck and lame-brained term, unless Putin removes him sooner, or the actuarial tables do, or his new enemy Musk does. Anywho, the next scheduled countdown is Monday. No results yet from the Tuesday special episode experiment. As you can see, it seems to have had an effect on my ability to contain myself in the regular Thursday episode, for which I apologize and/or thank you for your compliments. As always, bulletins as the news warrants, and remember, Trump is laying the groundwork now to not leave office later, so he must be stopped. So we will. Till the next one, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and wait for it. Good luck.